Hello, this is Funk McLovin. Recently I released a video called Class that was a rundown of all the classes in Homestuck. And in July, I posted a video called Aspect, which is the rundown of aspects in Homestuck. However, I didn't run down all of the aspects or all of the classes. There are a couple of actually canon classes and aspects that I didn't include in my previous analysis. And I didn't include them because they are, for lack of a better word, jokes. They are Joke Classpects. You might have heard of some of these Joke Classpects before. All of them have some kind of confirmation by Andrew Hussie or confirmation in the actual comic themselves. This video is going to be in 3 parts. The first part is going to be a rundown of all the classes and aspects that I missed. Then there's going to be a serious analysis of these Joke Classpects. And then at the end, there is going to be some extrapolation done by me, just for fun. So the first part of this video is going to be a rundown of all the classes that we missed, essentially. The first one is the most canon. I'm going to go kind of in order of most to least canon, or most to least plausible, I suppose. And that is the Gent of Piss, which is embodied by a character called Fedora Freak, or Dr. David Brenner, as he is sometimes speculated to be. He is the character who Nana was speaking to during, I believe, Act 2 or 3. And he is the character who was John's neighbor, who also managed to get into his own suburb session and die. Now, Fedora Freak was confirmed by Hussie to be known as the Gent of Piss. And Gent and Piss are both classes and aspects that are not shared by any of the trolls or humans. To me, this is interesting because it says there are probably classes and aspects out there that are in some way wrong or outside of the normal 12 dodecafold organization that it has. We're going to talk about Gent of Piss more in a minute, but that is the rundown. Next is the Waste of Space. Now, Waste is not a class that we've heard of, but Space is a regular aspect. And we could assume that waste could apply to any of the normal aspects because there's a lot of wordplay with a lot of these different aspects with waste. Like waste of space is a term. Waste of time is a term. Waste of life could be an insult. It gets more interesting when you have these sort of negative aspects like waste of void. How could you have a waste of void or waste of doom? Maybe that means that you kind of like wasted your entire life or something. You get the idea. Waste of X. Now, this is something that gets brought up a lot. I thought it was Hussie's class because that was a misconception I had, but it's not. His aspect is Huss of Lips, which we're going to talk about soon. And Hussie eventually wears the space garb, so I just in my head thought that was his like joke class because he obviously never god tiers in the story. I think this came from the MSPFA forums, but those are gone, so I cannot actually confirm any of that information. Number 3 is Nick of Time. This is another wordplay class. Nick of Time obviously means like you got something just in time. And Nick of Time is Nicolas Cage's aspect. This is per Hussie's form spring. This is a little more tenuous to me. This is more outwardly jokey. But, you could have a Nick class, a nick of time, a nick of space, a nick of life. We're going to talk more about it in depth in a minute, but I'm just mentioning it here. The 4th canonical classpect that was not discussed is the Huss of Lips. This is actually Hussie's joke classpect. This is also the only one he has explicitly disclaimed is a goof. Now, I don't think you could find a real Huss of Lips in the actual comic, because Hussie eventually puts on the space garb. I can't really tell what his hood is supposed to imply, maybe maid or sylph or something. I don't really know. But we're going to discuss the Huss of Lips aspect a little later, just for the sake of fun. So the second part is going to be a serious analysis of each of these joke classpects. And we're going to go one by one. We're going to break it up. First, we're going to talk about gents. A gent is a gentlemanly class, embodied by politeness and chivalry. You could compare a gent to a knight and a maid, kind of like a combination class of both of these. A gentleman. Not like a knight in that they are not explicitly strong or they don't fight, and not like a maid in that they don't explicitly serve. They are just generally kind men. They're trying to be a gentleman. And a gentleman, I think, is a very strong actual archetype to use as a class. I think gent is very plausible as a class. You could easily think of what a gent of time might look like. A gent of time, a gent of life. Someone who wants to preserve some kind of manners and etiquette and chivalry around these things. Next is the piss aspect. Taken alone, piss has to do with survival, liquid, and more literally piss. What we see of Fedora Freak is that he literally has to drink his own urine to survive on his land. I don't know if the land is ever named, but he's on a suburb land doing his quest, and he survives against the odds because of his piss class. Piss is this idea of clinging on for dear life. Think of someone like Bear Grylls in that old meme. Now I knew it was time to drink my own piss. Piss is associated with survival at all costs, and it is a natural bodily process which kind of reinforces that notion. This I kind of compare to breath and life, because breath is a natural bodily process, and life is about survival. And again, this is kind of that theory that like all of these joke classes or all fan classes are kind of combinations or fusions of other classes. The class video. That is what I interpret about the piss aspect. Next is the waste class. Waste is, very straightforwardly, about a lack or absence, someone who squanders their own aspect, someone who does not have it, someone who has used it all up, a has-been. It's very outwardly negative. The only two really outwardly negative classes that there are in canon are Page and Bard, and you could kind of interpret either of these as a waste. Page because they never reach their potential, and Bard because they kind of just use their own power for jokes and silliness. But waste has much more of a negative connotation. Waste, to me, would be a class that would be kind of like a failed class, like for somebody who was always meant to be kind of horrible. Next, we have the Huss class. Huss implies authorship, but not necessarily supremacy. A character who is nominally in charge, but not really, a figurehead. I compare this to a kind of combination of the Lord and Muse class, because of how much Hussey gets bullied by other narrators in his own work, like Doc Scratch and Caliborn. And he exists in his own work, but he gets bullied a lot by the characters inside of his own work. He actually dies in his own webcomic. And the character of Andrew Hussey does not have much actual power over Homestuck other than writing it mechanically, like just chronicling it. So the Huss class is kind of a chronicler class, and much like the Lord and Muse, they have a kind of supremacy over the narrative, but they're a figurehead. Their power is symbolic. Next is the lips aspect. This is an aspect based on speaking, oration, and influence through words. Again, lips goes back to how Hussey is the author of Homestuck. He made it. He wrote it. He tells it, as it were. This, to me, I can compare this to light, mind, and heart. Light aspect is concerned with information and knowledge. The mind aspect and the heart aspect are concerned with personality and their sort of persona. And the lips aspect has to do with persona as well as information, the conveying of information. I think lips is actually a good foundation for a fan aspect. I really like it, personally. I think it could have a better name, but and this is obviously based on how Hussey's lips are very thick, and people would kind of make fun of him for it. But I think it is interesting symbolically. Finally, the last class that was a joke was the Nick class, which is the nick of time implies something that is just squeaking by, getting there just in time. More broadly, this is a character or class who is just barely good enough, someone who is precisely what is needed, and might not have much of a use or effect outside of that. They're defined by a singular moment. I couldn't really think of characters who might fit this until I thought of Frodo from Lord of the Ring, who came through in the nick of time to throw the ring into Mordor. And obviously he was unable to in the actual book. However, he did do the thing that was needed. He did a lot of work to do one thing. Someone who is essentially responsible for something that is of great, huge importance. In the first Star Wars movie, the first chronological Star Wars movie, in other words, A New Hope, Luke is the nick of time because he can't really reach his potential through the whole film until he finally uses the Force to throw the proton torpedoes into the Death Star. I feel like it's kind of tenuous, but it does have its place as a class or an archetype. So the third part of this video is going to be just some fun. So on Twitter, a couple years ago, I posted some fan classes and aspects that I thought were funny. I just wanted to make a visual representation of the Gent of Piss, and it turned into me making little icons for other funny classes that I made up. So we have the Audacious 4 aspects, what I call them. Piss, shit, trash, and cum. The 4 waste aspects. Piss we've already covered, so I'm not going to recover that, but let's just run down the other 3 here. The cum aspect is about reproduction, lust, and the id. You can compare it to life and heart. Life has to do with reproduction in a sort of general sense. Space as well does, so you could also compare space to the cum aspect. You have heart because it has to do with sort of the id, ego, superego. Cum is related to this lust and id, this want and need that we have inside of us. The trash aspect has to do with disgust, byproducts, and waste. You can compare this to the doom and time aspects. Trash is essentially what everything is going to become eventually, right? If you make a consumer product, it's going to become trash. If you make a person, they're eventually going to become a dead body. This has to do with the idea of embracing waste and byproduct and making something new out of it, recycling almost. A sort of doomed aspect, but also one that is very potent. And then finally is the shit aspect, which, much like trash, also has to do with this sort of entropy, but also disease and utilization. Like, how can you use something up? You know, shit is a chemical process where in the body we turn food into a byproduct. We can see this in nature all the time, like when you burn wood, you get ash. You can also compare this to doom, but you can also compare shit to void. Whereas trash implies this kind of recycling aspect, shit is just like you're done with it. You use it up, essentially. It is something that you use up. And finally is the only fan class I made, which is dunce. And dunce I just made because I thought it would be funny. The dunce of time, the dunce of cum, the dunce of life. A dunce, to me, reflects that there are no explicitly negative aspects, negative classes. And I think there should be. Like, there should be negative classes. I don't think there should be negative aspects because they're all value neutral. But there are certain, like, connotations that all the classes have, and some of them are neutral, but some of them are explicitly good. And there could be a dunce class that could be a bad one, a stupid one. Because if you imagine, everyone achieves their ultimate class spec through rising in their echelon and getting to their full potential, right? And if you could think of, like, the air of breath being John's full potential, imagine what being a dunce would be for someone's full potential. That's very funny to me. A dunce is like a waste, a character defined by ineptitude and a lack. Someone who fundamentally doesn't understand their own aspect. Unlike waste, a dunce might have a very high power level in their own aspect. They just don't know how to wield it. I can kind of compare dunce to a prince in that they have a lot of haughtiness and maybe they're stuck in their ways. And also a page because they don't have full control of their class spec. They're defined not by potential like a page is, but by a lack. So that was the joke aspects and classes. I hope you enjoyed. This is kind of a shorter video. I'm going to release the class spec video together later. I think I'm going to have to split it into 2 videos. One video is going to be devoted to how to diagnose a character or yourself with a class spect. And then the second video is going to be all 300 and I believe 36 combinations of class, aspect, and lunar sway. And that's going to be kind of a more boring, straightforward video where I just list every combination of class, aspect, and lunar sway. And that is going to be how the video goes. I don't know when I'm going to release that because I don't know when SACON is going to be this year. But presumably if I'm accepted, that is going to be my panel for SACON, is the class spect information. So this was all the joke aspects. I hope you enjoyed. Have a great day. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I never ask people to do that shit because I think it's obnoxious. And I also don't censor myself. Like, I talk about piss and shit in this video because YouTube's monetization does not matter that much to me. And I'm just going to say it here because I have never said it anywhere else. But I think people who censor, like, dirty words for the sake of, like, a YouTube ad subscription are pretty much cowards. Like, just don't bother doing that. Just have a Patreon. Like, I don't understand why people bother fucking censoring themselves. Just say bad words. Like, we're not fucking teenagers here. Like, don't let YouTube decide what words you use. It's ridiculous. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Bye.